Chapter 1751. Since the Knowles aren't stable yet, he urgently wants to be engaged with you because he knows how much the Goldmans can help him. Daisy was sure about Knowles. He's not that kind of person. Even if he isn't, everyone, including Dad, thinks that way. Colton's words shocked her. She was shocked, not because she believed that Knowles was as Colton described, that he would use their engagement to solidify the standing of the Knowles, but instead how people saw their engagement, just like Colton said. There was no doubt about how her father saw it. If Knowles wanted to use their status to solidify his standing, why would he reject the king's help? Wouldn't it be easy to put the Knowles on the map with the help of the king? Knowles wanted to prove he could achieve his goal without help from anyone. But why could nobody understand? Was she the only one who did? Daisy looked down, looking sad. What Colton said devastated her, so he changed his tone. If you get engaged now, Dad won't agree to it since he doesn't like him. We don't even need to think what will happen after he fixes his social standing. Daisy nodded and was suddenly calm. I understand. Colton wanted to say something, but didn't until Waylon spoke. All right, let's eat some food. That evening, all the staff at the Knowles group had left for the day, but Knowles was still going through some numbers in his office. The phone on Knowles' desk vibrated. He immediately picked it up when he saw that it was Daisy. Hey, why are you calling me? Daisy was lying in bed and paused for a few seconds. Am I interrupting something? Knowles chuckled. No. Daisy whispered, Nolly, I want to see you. Knowles smiled. I'm afraid I can't make it now. I'll be there at 7? Daisy agreed. At 7 p.m. sharp, Knowles got Edison to drive to the Hilton Villas. The lights were just turning on in the streets. Daisy stood under the white street lamp in her loose-knitted jacket, looking gentle under the light. A car slowly drove in front of her. Knowles opened the door, got out, and stopped in front of her. Why are you standing outside? Daisy looked up at him, and the light shone on her face, making her look so beautiful. I'm waiting for you. Knowles pulled her into his arms and frowned. What's wrong? He could feel that something was off. Sunken in his arms, Daisy put her arms around his waist and pressed her cheek into his chest. Nothing, I just want to hug you. Knowles tilted her chin up. That's a lie. She pouted. Nolly, can we postpone our engagement? Knowles fell silent for a moment, then he pressed his palm to her cheek and asked, Are you having second thoughts? Not because of second thoughts. Daisy immediately explained, because Colton said. Before she could finish, Knowles placed his hand on her lips to stop her. I get it. There's no need to explain. Daisy thought he understood, but she noticed his eyes were cold. I thought you would be different from them and believe in me. Chapter 1752. Daisy's heart shuddered, and she shook her head. No, I do believe. Knowles backed away and put some distance between them. He stood with the light behind him, his features blurred by the light. She couldn't clearly see his expression. I didn't take everything into account. Nolly. It's getting dark. Go back. Knowles turned and walked to the car. He was cold, and that made Daisy extremely uncomfortable. Daisy turned forward to hold him. Nolly, I believe in you. I just don't want them to see you that way. Knowles' heart ached severely. He took a deep breath and said without looking back, I don't care what they think about me. I care if you think of me the same way too. I don't. Knowles turned to face her, and he looked smaller under the darkness. Me wanting to marry you has nothing to do with the power the Goldmans have. Daisy held her breath as her heart ached too. I know. If you really believe me. Knowles didn't finish his sentence. He took a deep breath and suddenly hugged her and kissed her crown. Go home. He then pulled away and left in his car. Daisy froze on the spot, the wind messing up her hair. Knowles looked at her through the rearview mirror, frowned, and sadness flashed across his eyes. He finally leaned back and closed his eyes. He had been too impulsive and hadn't taken everything into account. Why would the Goldmans easily agree to his engagement with Daisy? Daisy never saw him again after that night. Someone who had contacted her every day had suddenly disappeared from her life. Daisy sat in the library staring at the book but not understanding anything. She zoned out. She felt that there was a hole somewhere and wasn't used to that. Freya sat in the seat in front of her. Daisy? After a few tries, Daisy finally reacted with a forced smile. Yes, what's wrong? I should ask you that. You've been sitting there and not moving. What's on your mind? Freya placed her bag down. Daisy was quiet. The news report on the television suddenly showed an interview with Nolace. The reporter asked if he was engaged to Miss Vanderbilt. Nolace was silent for a moment before answering, "No, I won't be thinking about that soon either." The hand with which Daisy was holding the book tightened. Freya looked away from the television and at Daisy, worried. Daisy. Daisy looked down and didn't react. Daisy walked out of the library. Freya followed her and grabbed her. Daisy, wait. Daisy stopped but didn't look back. Freya walked in front of her and asked, "Weren't Nolace and you getting engaged? Why did it?" Freya, stop asking. Daisy didn't dare look up because she was afraid Freya would see her tears. Freya took a deep breath and grabbed her shoulders. Was your family against it? Daisy shook her head, but a big tear rolled down her cheek. Daisy. Before Freya could finish, Daisy wiped her tears and ran away. Freya watched her leave and frowned. She then walked quickly in another direction. At the business department, Waylon sat in the car and kept checking his watch, seemingly waiting for someone. Suddenly, a woman rushed over and blocked the window while pressing her hand on the door. "Get out here, Colton. I have questions." Chapter 1753. Waylon suddenly paused before looking at the girl, calling him Colton, and frowned. The driver was going to say something when Waylon cut him off and stared at the girl. "What do you want to ask?" Someone who knew them well would be able to tell them apart, but someone who wasn't close wouldn't be able to do that. They had the same face, but their personalities and marks on their faces were easily distinguishable. They had similar voices, but if someone paid attention, they would be able to tell that he had a deeper voice than Colton. Freya had never met the both of them, so it was impossible to tell their voices apart. He was in the car, and it was dark, so it was hard to tell them apart. What happened to Daisy and Nolace? Waylon squinted but didn't answer. Freya crossed her arms. "Don't stay silent. I'm sure you know the details. I can tell how much Daisy loves Nolace, so it's impossible that you, as a brother, can't." They were going to be engaged. "Do you know how bad Daisy feels now that Nolace changed his mind about that?" Waylon smiled. "So, you've come to tell me that?" Freya paused because she noticed Colton was different today, but she didn't think too much about it. "I just don't understand how you Goldmans think. You want a match, but don't Nolace and Daisy fit the requirements? Why did you stop their engagement? All you care about are benefits, just like the people with power? Are you on Nala's side?" "He's my cousin, so there shouldn't be an issue if I'm on his side." Freya smirked. "I feel sad for Daisy. The princess in the family can't marry the one person whom she loves." Waylon leaned back and chuckled. "You're Ken Pruitt's sister?" Freya was curious. "Are you kidding?" Colton knew that. Waylon didn't speak. At that moment, a voice came from behind her. "Freya Pruitt, what are you doing here?" Freya was stunned. She turned around to see Colton walking toward her. Colton looked shocked when he saw her standing in front of his brother's car. "What are you doing?" "You." Freya was shocked. She looked at the person sitting in the car, then at Colton. "Are they twins?" Waylon opened the door, fixed his coat, and got out. "She thinks that I'm you." Colton looked at Freya and asked, "How can I help you?" "I've said all that I wanted to say to him." You can ask him. Freya was angry, so she turned and left. Waylon watched while she walked away. She seems to care a lot about Daisy. Control paused as he looked back at him. She is, but we don't know if that'll still be the case in the future. People change. Waylon laughed and leaned on his car. You're still up in arms about Lisa, huh? Knowles gave up on the engagement. Colton paused for a few seconds and looked up. I guess he's logical. The problem is, Daisy. Daisy sat in the garden and looked like she had cried her eyes out. Suddenly, her phone rang. She checked and saw that it was Maisie calling. She took a deep breath, unsure what to expect, and placed the phone to her ear. Mom. Maisie asked, Daisy, has Waylon reached Yarramore? Chapter 1754. Yes, he's here. What's wrong with your voice? Daisy paused, because she didn't want her mother to worry. Don't worry, it's just a cold. You're a grown-up now, so you need to take care of yourself. How can I let you get married like this? When Daisy heard get married, she bit her lips to hold back her tears. Mom. Hearing her shaky voice, Maisie frowned. You're crying. I'm not. Daisy, you can tell me anything. Don't keep it to yourself. At Bassburg, at Black Gold, Nolan was just done with his meeting and was coming out of the conference room. Quincy, who just got a call, walked toward him. Sir, Mrs. Goldman has been waiting for you in the office for a while now. Nolan paused with a frown. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Quincy felt wronged. I didn't want to interrupt your meeting. Nolan immediately returned to his office, opened the door, and saw Maisie waiting in front of the window. He removed his jacket, placed it on the back of his chair, walked toward her, and hugged her. Maisie turned to look at him. Done with your meeting? Nolan rested his chin on her shoulder and chuckled. Quincy didn't tell me that you were waiting. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. It's all right, it was just a 40-minute wait. Maisie pushed him away, walked to the couch to take a seat, and poured herself a cup of tea. Your daughter is feeling terrible overseas and is crying. Nolan took a deep breath. Who dares make my daughter feel terrible? He remembered something, and his face dropped. Knowles? Maisie smiled. He wouldn't dare. The three of you are making her sad. Nolan covered his forehead. What the brothers did is not my fault. Maisie raised her eyebrow. The sons are following in their father's footsteps. That's all inherited. My darling wife. Nolan walked forward, half squatted in front of her, and grabbed her hand. You can't blame me for my son's behavior. How would I have the heart to hurt our daughter? Maisie looked at him. Really? Did you agree to our daughter's engagement with Knowles? He said, no. Maisie moved his hand away and stood up. Nolan pushed her back down on the couch and held her in his arms. Let me explain. Maisie raised her eyebrows and waited for him to do so. Nolan took a deep breath. I don't agree because the Knowles group isn't stable yet. If Daisy got engaged to him now, all the pressure would fall on him, and everyone would think that he's using our family to help solidify his standing. Knowles is ambitious, so nobody knows if the pressure will get to him. He will be insulted if he feels that Daisy brought all his success. What will happen if he hurts her? When a man was fighting, the worst thing that could happen when it came to power was if someone said he accomplished something because of his lady. If her family had a strong connection, the man would have to have enough power that could rival her family's to find balance. Equal power didn't exist, so when men gave women equality, it was just out of respect. Not all women were like Maisie, but if the man was weaker than the woman, he wouldn't be able to stand tall in that marriage. Such a marriage wouldn't last long. Maisie fell into deep thought because what Nolan said sounded true. Nolan loved her, so he was willing to bow down to her, but it didn't mean that Nolan was afraid of her. Chapter 1755. The Knowles group had a good start, but it wasn't stable yet. If Daisy got engaged to Nolace, the world would think that he used the Goldmans to stabilize his company. Maisie had hoped for Nolace because he had what it took. She remembered something and asked, "Do you think Nolace is like that?" "It's better to be safe than sorry." Nolan hugged her and made her sit on his lap. "They're still young, especially Nolace. Even Yorick praises his capabilities. If he really loves Daisy, won't it be even better when he reaches the peak?" She smiled and pinched his chin. "He's the king's grandson, so he doesn't need our help. It's obvious that the Goldmans are just picky." Nolan grabbed her hand and chuckled. "You're a Goldman too. You can't talk bad about us." Maisie choked and pulled her hand away. "Speak to Nolace. I heard that Miss Livingston from Hanniston fell for Nolace at first sight and asked King William to arrange their marriage. We can't just hand the man our daughter loves to some other woman." Nolan kissed her. "Yes, whatever you say, my love." At Yarramore, at the Knowles mansion, Diana walked into the room with a bowl of soup. She heard Nolace coughing and went in but saw that he was busy working, so she walked over. "It's getting colder now, so you should take a rest now that you have a cold." Nolace balled up his fist and continued coughing. "I'm sorry for making you worry." "I'm fine." Diana felt bad. "Your uncle can help look after your company. You've worked hard enough for these few years." "Not at all. He thought that it was worth it." Diana saw the picture of Daisy he had placed next to his desk and picked it up. "It's rare to see that my son is so into a girl." "Isn't Dad very much into you too?" "Not at all." She scoffed but didn't sound angry. "Your dad didn't want to marry me. He was forced to. He didn't like me much, but it changed after we married." Nolace smiled. "At least he loves you a lot now. What about you?" She placed the picture down and looked at Nolace. "How much do you like Daisy?" Nolace didn't reply because there was no point in measuring love. Diana reminded him to take his medication on time before leaving the room. Nolace rubbed the bridge of his nose and looked at his phone, which was buzzing. The number on the screen was from Zlokova. He could guess who it was. That evening, at the Hilton Villas, Daisy pushed her food around at the dining table and didn't eat much of it. Waylon, who was sitting across from her, looked up and handed her some food. "I thought you missed my cooking. Why aren't you eating?" "I'm not hungry." "Is it because of Nolace?" She paused, then pressed her lips together. Waylon sighed and rubbed her head. "Daisy, Colton wasn't against Nolace when he said those things to you. We can both tell how Nolace treats you, but your engagement time isn't ideal." Daisy looked around. "I understand. Just like you said, the world will think that our engagement stems from convenience and not love." Chapter 1756. "But I don't want other people to think that he's that kind of person. I just want everyone to understand him." Daisy's eyes were wet with tears. Waylon wiped the tear off the corner of her eyes and said, "You're so silly. Do you think Nolace cares how other people think about him?" Daisy parted her mouth, and just when she wanted to say something, the words that Nolace had said to her surfaced in her head. "Do you see me that way too, Daisy?" The reason he had gotten angry was not that she wanted to postpone their engagement, it was because he thought she saw him the same way as everyone else did. Daisy clenched the fork in her hand tightly, and it was only now she realized the reason Nolace had gotten so angry was that she had not explained to him what she really wanted to say that day. He had assumed she chose not to believe in him because Colton had told her something. Daisy lifted her head. "Waylon, You should finish your meal first." Waylon interjected, cutting her short. "After you finish your meal, go back to your room and rest. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow." Daisy nodded. The next day, at the Knowles group, Daisy stood in front of the door and hesitated for a long while before she finally decided to go inside. She felt that she had to talk to Nolace and explain to him. However, the staff at the reception told her that Nolace had not been coming to the company recently. Daisy was stunned and asked, "Where has he been?" The receptionist forced a smile on her face and replied, "I'm sorry. I don't know about that." When Daisy came out of the Knowles group, she ran into Tristan, who had just gotten out of his car. She ran toward him and said, "Uncle Tristan." Tristan was taken aback when he heard her voice and turned his head around. "Daisy? What are you doing here?" Before she could say anything, he smiled and continued. "Are you here to look for Knowles?" Daisy nodded. "Knowles is sick, so he hasn't been coming to the company these few days." She jerked her head up, and her face was filled with disbelief. "He's sick? He didn't tell you about it?" Tristan came to an abrupt stop upon asking that question. Given Knowles' temperament, it went without saying that he wouldn't tell Daisy about it when he was sick. After a short while of silence, Daisy asked, "Is he home now?" Tristan nodded. Meanwhile, at the Knowles mansion, Knowles heard some commotion and came downstairs. Peter said, "It's the Livingston, sir. They wanted to see you, but the guards didn't let them come in." All of them knew about the things that happened to the Livingstons. The guards didn't let them through because they thought Knowles didn't want to see them. Knowles said calmly, "Let them in." Peter went out to inform the guards, allowing the Livingstons to enter. When Juno and Zenovia entered, the first thing that caught Knowles' attention was the gift in Juno's hand. Juno took a step forward and put the gift on the table. "Young Mr. Knowles, we apologize for what happened at the banquet that night. I hope you can accept this gift." Knowles took his seat and said, "I think I'm not the one you should be apologizing to, right, Mr. Livingston?" Juno was momentarily stunned. Knowles was right. The one he had offended was Daisy, not Knowles. He thought for a while and said, "Consider this gift as a congratulatory gift from me to you for your engagement with the daughter of the Goldmans." Knowles' face sank as he looked at him indifferently. "Do you think I have the right to help you, Mr. Livingston?" Juno felt a little embarrassed since Knowles had seen through his intentions. After all, his daughter had a feud with Daisy. He was pretty certain he would get humiliated if he went to apologize to Daisy. He thought that Knowles could help put in some good words for them because of their relationship with the king. Chapter 1757. Seeing that Knowles was giving her father a hard time, Zenovia couldn't help herself and interrupted. "Mr. Knowles, even if you don't want to help us, you don't have to be like this." Knowles did not say anything. "Zenovia." Juno wanted to say something, but Zenovia cut him short again. "You chose Daisy over me because you want the help from the Goldmans, right? I heard that you said the other day that you're not going to get engaged with her. That's because you know that it's not that easy, right?" Juno became nervous. He told his daughter to stop talking, but she ignored him. "Did I say anything wrong? The king wants us to support the Knowles. That's why he wants me to get engaged to Knowles. Although we're not as good as the Goldmans, we can give everything that they can offer as well." Knowles lifted his head and looked at Zenovia indifferently. "So, in your opinion, marriage is just something for you to gain benefits?" "Yes, I don't deny that." Zenovia walked up to him and continued, "It's true that it'll be a great help to the Knowles if you can get engaged to Daisy. But have you forgotten about her brothers? Do you think they'll really let you gain anything from the marriage? If she marries you, it means she has to give up on everything she has and come to live with you in Yarramore. The Goldmans dote on her, so do you think they'll let her come here? As for you, you're the eldest grandson of the Knowles. I'm sure you won't give up everything you have here just to be with her, right? As for me, although I'm the only descendant in the Livingstons, I'm not asking for much. I don't need you to abandon your identity or everything you have here. I can stay here in Yarramore to help you. Besides, marrying me isn't as complicated as marrying Daisy, and you don't have to worry about other things as well." Knowles chuckled and said, "You're right." Zenovia's eyes glowed, and she leaned forward to look at him. "I know all men who venture into the business world are ambitious, and I can help you achieve all your dreams. It's up to you whether or not you want me to help you, Mr. Knowles." Knowles looked at her without saying anything. His pupils were light-colored, and they seemed endless like the abyss. Meanwhile, Daisy had just arrived. From her angle of sight, Zenovia was very close to Nolace right now, and they seemed to be kissing. "Sir," Peter called out. Nolace looked over to Peter, and he was stunned when he saw Daisy. Zenovia turned her head over, and a triumphant smile appeared in her eyes when she saw her. Even though Daisy was the daughter of the Goldmans, her level was too high for Nolace. Zenovia was confident that the Goldmans would not approve of their engagement. Both of them had the same social status, and Nolace was the king's grandson, but he still had to have the same capabilities as the Goldmans if he wanted to marry Daisy. After all, Nolace was just the king's grandson. He was not the future heir to the throne. He may enjoy the same benefits as the royal family, but he did not belong to the royal family. The Knolls had fallen from grace several years ago. Although they had gotten back on their feet in recent years, they were not strong enough for the Goldmans to approve of their marriage. The more Daisy thought about it, the more heartache she felt. She said, "I'm sorry for the interruption. You guys can continue." Daisy turned around and left. Nolace wanted to chase after her, but he thought of something and forewent the attempt in the end. Chapter 1758. Zenovia sensed something and was even more confident in her speculation. "Well, it seems like I was right. You and she are having problems so soon." Nolace rose to his feet and replied expressionlessly, "It has nothing to do with her, and it's none of your business either." He turned around and said, "Peter, please see them at the door." After that, he went upstairs without turning his head around. Zenovia did not say anything anymore and left the Knolls' mansion with her father. Meanwhile, Daisy had just gotten into the car. Before the driver could start the engine, Zenovia walked up to the car and knocked on the window. Daisy rolled the window down but did not say anything. Zenovia leaned on the window and said with a smile on her face, "Mr. Vanderbilt, can I have a minute with you?" Daisy looked at her and asked, "What do you want to say?" "I apologize for my actions earlier on, since I didn't know who you were, but I won't quit." Zenovia looked into her eyes and continued. "It's true that you come from a prestigious family, but unfortunately, you're a Goldman. There's no way the Goldman will approve of your relationship. It's such a shame that your relationship is going to get destroyed in your hands." Daisy's chest heaved up and down heavily as she clenched her fists tightly. She took a deep breath and said, "So do you think he'll choose you?" "Miss Livingston, I have known him longer than you think." "So?" Zenovia chuckled. "It doesn't mean anything. Even if you guys grew up together since childhood, you still have to bow your heads down before reality. Nolace is the most charismatic man I've ever seen. His charm is that he knows exactly what he needs. He will never bow his head down toward the Goldmans. He will have to face many problems to marry you, but he won't have to worry about anything if he marries me." Daisy wanted to say something in return, but the next thing Zenovia said stumped her. "I have the freedom to pick whatever I want, but as a Goldman, do you think you have the luxury of making your own decisions?" When Daisy came to her senses, Zenovia was already gone. Several days later, at the college, there was a callback for the drama examination. Freya looked around in the examination hall, but she couldn't find Daisy anymore. When she went to ask the professor, she told her that Daisy had taken a leave of absence. After the test was over, Freya carried her bag and came out of the examination hall. Then, she ran into Waylon, who was standing in front of a car under the building. Freya was momentarily stunned. Due to the fact that she had mistaken him for Colton the last time, she couldn't tell if the man in front of her right now was Colton or Waylon. Then, Waylon walked up to her and asked, "Do you still have class in the afternoon?" Freya had come to know Colton. She was certain that he wouldn't ask her like this, so she was confident the one standing in front of her was Waylon. "You're Colton's brother? You finally can recognize us now? Did something happen?" Waylon opened the door and said, "I wouldn't have come to you if nothing had happened. Get into the car." Freya hesitated for a moment before getting into the car. She looked outside toward the window and realized that they were heading toward the Hilton Villas. She asked, "Why hasn't Daisy been coming to the college lately?" Waylon sat with his legs crossed. He was more mature and sterner compared to Colton. Although Colton was indifferent toward the people around him, he had a sharp tongue and was straightforward. He would not hold back when he was criticizing someone and often ended up hurting other people's feelings. However, his brother was different. He was calm and collected. Isn't the reason obvious? Is it because of no lace? Even though Waylon did not reply, Freya knew it was because of no lace. The car was stopped in the courtyard. Freya followed behind him into the villa. When they were going upstairs, Waylon called out to her. Chapter 1759. Freya turned around to look at Waylon, and he said, "I hope you know what you should and shouldn't say." It was very apparent that no lace was the reason that Daisy refused to go to the college, and Freya surmised that something must have happened between them. Besides, Daisy must have locked herself up in her room, drowning herself in her sadness, because of the thing that had happened between her and no lace. If Freya said the wrong thing, it would further aggravate the situation. Freya chuckled and asked, "So what do you expect me to say? Ask her to break up with him? Or tell her to go back to him?" Waylon looked at her for a long while before answering, "What do you think?" She did not say anything and went upstairs. She walked to Daisy's room and knocked on the door. Daisy's voice rang out from her room. "The door isn't locked." Freya pushed the door open. The first thing she saw was Daisy sitting on the bed with her knees in her arms, and it was clear that she was sad right now. When Daisy saw Freya, she was stunned. "Freya?" Freya walked up to her and sat on the bed. "You haven't been coming to college lately, and your brother, your eldest brother, is worried about you. As such, he brought me here to check on you." Daisy lowered her head and did not say anything. Freya looked at her and asked, "Daisy, did something happen? Why don't you tell me about it?" Daisy rested her chin on her knees and shook her head. "You always say that I'm your friend, but you refuse to share your problem with me. Do you know that it really hurts me?" Freya sighed. Daisy lifted her head and looked at her. After a short while of silence, she said, "Freya, does everyone think that No Lace wants to get engaged to me because he's forced by my parents or that he's anxious to achieve fame and fortune?" Freya was stunned. Daisy let out a bitter smile and continued. "Maybe Zenovia was right. She can make her own decisions in her family. No Lace won't have to face so many problems if he marries her. But I'm different. There are a lot of things that I can't decide for myself. I know that my parents and brothers love me very much. They just want to protect me. They have their reasons for doing so, and I believe they will never force me to do anything I don't want to do. I just don't want them to look at No Lace that way. I have always believed in him, but I don't know what to do." Freya wrapped her arms around Daisy and patted her back softly. "Do you trust him, Daisy?" "Of course, I do. If you trust him, then you don't have to care about what Zenovia said." Freya placed her hand on her shoulder and looked her in the eyes. "Even if you call off the engagement now, it doesn't mean that you won't get engaged in the future. I'm sure No Lace has his own reasoning for calling off the engagement, but it shouldn't be the factor that affects your relationship." Daisy fell silent and did not say anything for a while. Someone knocked on the door, and Freya went forward to open the door. Waylon was standing in front of the door. He looked at Daisy and asked, "How did it go?" Freya stood aside and asked, "Isn't it better to directly get No Lace here and solve the problem?" "I can't get to him." Freya was stunned. What? There was no reason for No Lace to switch off his phone. Had something happened to him? She pulled her phone out and made a call to No Lace. Just as Waylon had said, No Lace had switched off his phone. Both of them stood in the corridor, and Freya asked, "Tell me everything that happened." Waylon looked at her and chuckled. "Aren't you his cousin? If you want to know everything that happened, you should just go to look for him." Freya fell silent for a few seconds. Waylon retracted his gaze and turned around. "By the way, Ask him what he thinks. If he wants to break up with Daisy, then he should do it before it's too late. Chapter 1760. Freya asked, I thought you wanted me to be the mediator between them? Waylon stopped in his tracks and said without turning his head. He chose to turn off his phone. Isn't it obvious enough? Then, he went down the stairs. Freya stood on the spot and clenched her fists tightly. She went straight to the Knowles mansion as soon as she left the Hilton Villas. Before the butler could inform Knowles, she had already barged into the study room. When she went inside the study room, she found out that Knowles was not the only one inside. Zenovia was inside the study room as well. Half of her body was leaning toward Knowles. If she hadn't gotten into the study room, she was certain she would have thrown herself onto Knowles. Zenovia's face sank when she saw Freya. Who are you? Don't you know that you need to knock on the door before coming in? Freya ignored her and looked at Knowles. What the hell are you thinking? Are you really going to break up with Daisy? Knowles frowned but did not say anything. Zenovia turned around to face Freya and said, why don't you ask what the Goldmans are thinking instead? It seems to me that they don't think Mr. Knowles deserves their daughter at all. If you don't know what to say, then I suggest you keep your mouth shut, Freya said while frowning. Why? I'm just stating the truth. Zenovia crossed her arms in front of her chest as she condescendingly looked at Freya. The Goldmans are way out of our league. If Mr. Knowles marries Daisy, people will say he's only trying to take advantage of the Goldmans. Freya's face sank. Zenovia continued with a grin on her face. Besides, marriage isn't only about two people. There's no way Daisy can make her own decisions about her future spouse. I guess you should ask her to stop pestering Mr. Knowles. Is this what you think as well? Freya looked at Knowles, who had been silent the whole time. If he said yes, then it meant she was wrong about him. He did not deserve Daisy's love at all. Knowles tapped his finger rhythmically on the desk but did not say anything in return. When Zenovia saw that Knowles did not say anything, a triumphant smile appeared on her face as she said, Miss, can't you see that Mr. Knowles doesn't want to talk about it anymore? Freya turned around. She stood in front of the door and said without turning her head. Knowles, no matter what happened between you and Daisy, you shouldn't let an outsider interfere with your relationship. If you want to break up with her, you should tell her early. After she finished speaking, she left. The study room was silent for a long while even though Knowles looked calm and there was no expression on his face. The anger and anxiety deep in his eyes belied his true emotion. Zenovia couldn't read his mind at all. However, she was confident that what Knowles needed right now was someone who could help him. Mr. Knowles, it has been a day. Can you give me your answer now? She rested her hands on the desk and looked at him. If you say you need me, I'll stay by your side and help you with all my power. Anything that the Goldmans can give you, I can give you as well. You just need to. She paused for a few seconds, and a smile crept onto her face. You just need to marry me. Knowles lifted his eyes and looked at her. There was some emotion in his eyes that Zenovia couldn't read as he asked, Are you begging me, or am I begging you? It doesn't matter. She smiled. What matters is that you want to bring the Knowles group back to its feet. King William's original intention is for me to help you, and it is not a bad deal for you to marry me. Initially, she thought she was out of the game already, but an opportunity presented itself in front of her again. She did not believe that Knowles would let go of such a good opportunity. He wouldn't have become Daisy's boyfriend if he wasn't an ambitious man. Daisy was one of the Goldmans. As a Goldman, Daisy could provide a lot of help to Knowles, but the problem was she couldn't make her own decision when it came to her marriage. However, she was different. She was born into the Livingstons and had the freedom to choose who she wanted to marry. Compared to the Goldmans, a much more complicated family, she was obviously the better option. Marriage was nothing more than a deal. She did not care if Knowles did not love her. She was confident that she would be able to warm up Knowles' cold heart if she was given enough time. Even if he did not love her now, he would fall in love with her in the future.